Okay, so today we're going to do a bypass ring tutorial. And for our bypass ring, I thought we'd do a fun little falling star sort of design. We're also going to work on some micro prongs. So let's go ahead and save what I got here, open a new file and get started. Okay, we have a brand new file here. Yay. Since it's a ring, the first thing we're going to do is put in our ring rail. I'm going to make this a US size 7, just because that's pretty standard, and hit create. Now I've got my ring rail. Now, I want the shapes to come down this way and up this way. I've already created some shapes to save us a little bit of time. At this point, you should already know how to create circles. So I'm just going to paste some stuff in here. Look at that. So if we're looking at this from the top, that's what it looks like. Only problem is, how do we get this to match this curve? Well, there's a handy dandy command in your curve tab. Curve from 2 views. Select your first curve, select your second curve. Ta-da, now you have this curve matching that curve. It also gives you an extra one down here. You just delete that. Do the same thing with this one. Much better. Okay. I'm going to throw these on another layer just to get rid of them. We'll put them on the yellow layer and no show that yellow layer. Okay. Now I'm going to cut the ring rail to these 2 curves, just so that I can join them together and make one nice continuous curve. So cut, objects. I've selected everything, clicked, right clicked, enter, objects to trim. Just get rid of that. That's it. And join them all together. Okay. So now we've created basic bypass. Our next job is to get some profiles on there. But first, if I click on my profile, it's got a whole lot of unnecessary points here. That can get in the way later. So I'm going to show you a handy command for when your curves are being a pain because they've been projected and they have way too many points. It's called rebuild. We can select the amount of points we want, and it will show us where the new curve would deviate from the old curve. What we really want is a minimum amount of points and still have an acceptable deviation. For example, right now the deviation is crazy because I only have 7 points. And you can see the maximum deviation distance right here. I want it to look pretty close with the minimum number of points. Let's see, that's That's looking pretty close. Okay. See, much less points. It'll be much more convenient to manipulate. So, just like we did in the solitaire video, we're going to want to put some profiles on this curve. I'm not doing an unusual profile. I don't need an outside ring rail. It's going to be a consistent thickness, so I'm just going to use one curve. Select curve. Okay. Because these curves are going all over the place, we may have to futz around with this to make this fit. I want my profile to be fairly square. I think on this end it can be rounded because I'm only putting stones on this end. And let's see. We'll go with 1.8 by 1.8 for this end of the ring. And let's put another one here. Right there, that's good. And we want one more. We'll be right about there is pretty good. This one I'm going to make square so that this profile transitions from square to that kind of rounded before it gets to the edge of the ring. Okay. I want this 2 millimeters wide. Actually, let's do 2.5 millimeters wide here. That'll work. We're going to try to rotate this into somewhat more like what we want. There. I want my sweep to end kind of on an angle over here, so that's what I'm going to go with. And hit create. Now I want to move this guy around. So I came over here, clicked on the little triangle and clicked rotate. My center of rotation, let's turn my go snap on, is the intersection between the profile and the rail. And then I'm going to click on my multiple views here. And this is the one that needs to rotate. And I'm just going to bring this up and kind of make it parallel to the ring rail. Let's check it from the other views and make sure it's still okay. Nope. So again, where it intersects the rail, we want this virtually upright. Now that's looking better. changed angles here a little bit. So let's modify that again. That's pretty good. Okay. This one, we need to do the same thing. Okay, that's getting there. We've got a little more perpendicular. Yep, I think that's gonna work. Okay. So now we've got all of our sweep profiles in there, and they're where we want them. Let's go ahead and sweep. Surface tab, sweep 1, because we're only using 1 rail. Click on all my profiles in order. Make sure all of my seams are in the right spot. That looks pretty good, but I forgot to do history. A couple versions ago, Rhino introduced this history button. Many of the commands in Matrix Gold have a history built in, but the sweep command currently does not. And it's one of the commands that you most want to have the history button, because you tend to go back and adjust the curves, adjust these angles to get things just how you want them. So this works on a per command basis. And what it does is records what you did in that command, so that should you modify one of these profiles, it will update your sweep as well. I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so I click on the record history, then I start my command. Click all of those and make sure all my seams are in the right place. Okay, there we go. That looks pretty good. Fairly happy about that. Okay. I want to edit these curves. So I'm going to click edit. Select profile. I want to make them a little wider. Say 0.1. At 2.2, 1.8, that sounds pretty good. Great. So when I changed that, it modified my sweep. I'm going to do the same to this one. The numbers are still correct. There we go. I think I'm going to make this a little thicker. That didn't work the way I wanted it to, did it? It skewed it in a very strange way, likely because this profile was rotated quite a bit. So I think that was still at 2. Go back to 2. Okay. What I'm going to do, if you hold down the control key and rotate the gumball, it moves the gumball relative to the object, making it easier for you to modify things that are not necessarily on a construction plane already. There we go. That's probably broken the history, but I didn't get an error, so we'll cross our fingers. Okay. Okay. So I need a little more. That'll work. Okay. It's updating the history. Hopefully it stops and does what we want it to do. I hit escape to get that to stop because that was weird. I'm going to go ahead and close this and just modify my profile. Again, I'm going to change the orientation of the gumball. So that things move the way I want them to. And I'm just going to drag this out wider. Okay. That's pretty good. Now I want these two to touch. I'm just not sure that I want them to touch yet. Let's see. So to edit that, I'm going to select my curve here and move these points around a bit. When I select this little grid here, what that does is moves me only on the plane of that grid, which is a plane that's parallel to my construction plane in this case. That way I'm not moving in 3 dimensions at once. It can be very confusing for the computer. Ooh, so close, a little more. There we go. Lovely. Okay. So I've got my basic sweep all set up. I should probably save this. Okay. Now, let's put profile caps on our sweep here so we can make that a solid. So in our ring setting, there's profile cap. Select profile. Okay. This one doesn't really matter because it's going to be hidden up inside our star. That's good enough. We can even make it flat. We can just cap it. So we're going to hit create. Okay. So now we've got that there. Now let's do this one. Let's see. I'm gonna make it a little thicker. Make it a little thicker. There we go. That's pretty good. Create. Done. I'm going to join these together so I can make a closed surface. Now, joining them together obviously broke the history on the sweep. So make sure you've got your sweep where you want it before you break the history. Okay. Extra one in there? Is there? I can't tell. There we go. We don't need that. There we go. Okay. Great. Now let's take care of our star. This is pretty simple. What I want to do is create a star and then cut this smaller one out of it so I have a recessed area to put my stone. I know that this is 1.8 millimeters tall, so I'm going to make this at least 2 millimeters tall. Go to my solid tools, extrude closed planar curve. And I'm going to make this 2 1/4. Sounds great. This one, I can make it the same. It doesn't matter because I'm going to move it up. Let's see how high we want to move it. I want it no more than 1 millimeter deep. So start getting that far, and this distance to the bottom here, we don't want this a whole lot thinner than this is deep, because otherwise it'll break off when you cast it. So that's probably pretty good. I'm not going to cut that out of there just yet, but I am going to move this up into place. Let's see. Do I like my star there? Yeah, that'll be okay. Okay. Let's check my distances here. I get that as far up as I can without this popping at the bottom. See, it's popping out a little bit there. There we go. But I do want a little gap here so that that stands out. Okay. Now I'm going to use my boolean tool again and stick these together before cutting this out. Because if I do it the other way, the part of this that's up in there will show. We don't want that. So those two are stuck together. Now I'm going to cut the other star out. Done. Okay. this needs a stone. I'm gonna go to the top view so I can see where everything's gonna go. And going to go to jewelry setting, a little heart here. I want a stone. I'm gonna guess I want a stone around 2 millimeters. Can't really see it. Oh, let's go back here and just turn it on wireframe. That might be okay. Okay. Great. I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to drag it over here. Yep, that's not too bad. It's still down on the construction plane, so we have to move it up now. I'm going to bring it up above this bottom line here. Let's see what that looks like. I'll even go a little higher. There we go. I like to set my stones a little below the top surface here because when I go and sand that off, I'm not going to hit my stones. It's just a lot easier to sand that way. And it protects the stones from getting bumped around and whatnot. So that's a good height. Okay. Now we need some prongs. If I use the prong builder here, there isn't an option for 5 prongs. So I'm going to use prongs on surface. Select the object, circle on object. There we go. And hey, look, there's a prong. I'm going to go to the top view just to make sure that I'm not dealing with any view error, like seeing it at an angle or anything. And I'm going to kind of eyeball the prongs in there. I'm making them overlap the stone just a little bit. There we go. Now we've got some prongs in there. Where'd they go? I didn't hit enter. Let's do it again. There we go. Now I've got some prongs. They're not sticking up very far, so I'm going to move them all up. I've got a little distance to go before they get too tall. Think, oh, maybe not. That's okay. Stretch them. Okay, that's good. We want them to intersect this bottom part of the star here. Great. The last thing I want to do with this part, I want to create a hole down the middle so that I know exactly where I want to set that stone. And the hole is going to come out this side. Whenever possible, you want a hole to go all the way through. One, so that you can get rouge and assorted cleaning agents and gunk out from behind the stone. And should you ever need to pop the stone out, you can push it out from the back. Okay, let's see. I need cutters. And I picked the first one here. And I'm going to select my gem. And it's going to pop a cutter in there for me. Let's go look at the side view so we can see what we're doing. Now, it automatically makes the nudge negative 0.1. I tend to make the cutters definitely smaller than my stone because I don't really want to cut the seats in my models. I'd rather do that by hand so I can adjust for variations in stones or casting shrinkage. So I'll usually make that fairly small. This, I don't like that this is tapered. So I'm going to come over here and change that, make it less tapered. Make it go all the way through. The hole size is probably okay. Let's see what we got here. Let me make that a little bigger if we want to. There we go. Because again, we don't want holes that are significantly taller than they are wide. Because remember, that's going to be like a little thread of investment. That's pretty good. I'm gonna hit create there. Now our star is ready to go. Aside from assorted Boolean operations that we'll do later. Okay. Now we need to put our stones along here. This is definitely not as thick as it was in the other one, but that's okay. Now, originally I started doing this. I created a curve and I did gems on curve. That turned out to be kind of a pain because it didn't really fit this surface well. And then I found a better way to do this for this particular problem. If you go to Pave and you click on this little icon here, it opens up gems to point curve on object. It's a lot. So I select my object. I'm going to select point poly. What that wants me to do is put points on the surface where I'm going to want essentially the line for my stones to be created. It's probably good to turn off object snap for this. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it. So is that where I want my last stone? Maybe one more. And hit reset. And now I've got these points in here. Okay. Okay. There we go. Oh, I did like a little loop there. Probably because I clicked that again. Let's go back. Okay. There we go. I'm just kind of trying to put these in the middle. There. That's an interesting spot for that to show up. Okay, so that's a weird spot for those to show up. So if I just click reset, hopefully they're going to pop right back up where you want them to go. Now, obviously, this is bigger here than it is over here. So I want to click the start. I want to change the start and the end. I'm going to make the start 2.75. Oh, I think here we go. Wrong command over here. There we go. 2.75. Okay. That seems a bit big. I want to move this down a little bit, so I'm going to grab that plane and just pop that down there. Okay. Let's change that first stone to 2.5. Still a little bit much, I think. Yeah, that's better. For these shared micro prong sort of things, I don't mind if the edge of the stone hangs over a little bit. And then the end size, I know that the width of the ring is 2, so we're going to bring that down to about 1.9. Oh, my start size and my end size are backward. No. There we go. Okay. I'm fairly happy with that. I'm fairly happy with the spacing here. We can change that spacing. We can go up to 0.2. It does start to affect how many stones we have. So if you have a specific amount of stones, you got to worry about that. Don't go less than 0.15 though. That's a very tiny amount. It looks huge here, but it's really like really tiny. So okay, I want that to show up. So I'm going to move this down a little more. There we go. Okay. That looks pretty good. But all my stones are sitting up way too high. So I'm move them all down. Down below the surface here. It's all hiding. If you want to see how far below the surface they are, kind of look in our other views. There we go. A little more. I don't want to go too far because then they'll start poking out the bottom. There we go. Okay, that's good. Now, what I want to do is a couple of things. I'm going to create a channel all the way down the center here. And then I'm going to cut some micro prongs across. That's how you would do it if you were carving it out of wax. So that's how it's commonly done, even when you're doing it in CAD. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to select my little group here, cutters, channel. I want a rounded channel. Select my gems. That's doing weird things. Maybe I need to tell it to orient to the surface. Okay, let's figure out where it went. Interesting. Okay. So if I don't orient to the surface, it does this weird loop thing. Okay. And it disappears. Okay, we click fix indices. There we go. That gets us where we want to go. I want this channel to go out past the end of my stone. I think that's this command here. Yep, that's that one. Okay. Well, maybe not quite that far. Okay. Okay. Lifting is how high this is going to be. So we want it to be all the way up through here. I don't want it to be way, way down here because then I have like no metal there. So it needs to be below the girdle, but with enough metal down here to support the ring. So let's take a look at some of our other views and kind of guess where we're at. I want at least 1 millimeter. That's probably close, maybe 0.8 millimeters. So I'm okay with that. And is it completely above? We're not completely above. Let's make it taller. So we're going to go to the height. I'll just make that taller. Make sure it goes all the way up above my sweep. Okay. We have a rounded bottom. I think all of these are okay. Just hit create. Okay. Now let's put in our micro prongs. Okay. Here's our micro prongs. That one's looking pretty funky. Maybe we can fix it. There we go. Fix indices helped us again. I want these to go all the way through this way, because this is the sort of thing you would do with maybe a crow burr or a saw blade or a small round file if you were doing this in wax. So there we go. That goes all the way through. I'm going to adjust this down to as small as I can get away with, so I don't have to mess with this too much, because I don't want it to cut into there any more than it has to. Oh, but it's not cutting through here. Well, I'll just have to ungroup and just adjust this one here. Okay. That looks pretty good, but these are way too deep. I also think I want to make them a little wider. It's this button here. Yeah, that's getting there. There. We want this dip to go below the girdle, but again, we don't want to leave a tiny amount of metal down here. So we don't want to cut our ring too thin. I also like to make these kind of curved. So that's where I adjust this. That way I can also get away with a little, it creates kind of like a little bevel on the outside here. Okay, that looks pretty close. Now, we also need to cut little lines in between here, so we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4 prongs instead of 2 shared prongs. I don't like to do shared prongs unless I absolutely have to. So that's what this down here is. So on middle, fix indices, there we go. Now we have these little yellow ones that are in between. I kind of want those to be real sharp. So I'm going to make them pointy. I'm going to make them longer. There we go. Okay. I'm going to make them narrower. So they're just like a little slit. And I don't think they need to be quite that deep, because I'll probably go in and clean it up with a saw blade anyway. So let's see, that's this one. We just need an indicator there so that they're nice and even. That looks good. Let's make sure that, yep, our channel intersects that cutout. We like that, but it doesn't exceed it. That's pretty close there. Okay, good. Create, create, done. Okay. Now I've got all our cutters. Let's cut them out. Let's go ahead and save. Okay. Boolean, intersect, select your ring rail, right click, select your surfaces. Okay. So the only problem we have here is we forgot to move those guys. Got to do that because that looks not so great. And these actually could stand to be a little deeper, I think. So we're going to go back. I'm going to have to ungroup these. I'm just typing in ungroup. Okay, now I can move them individually. And so as I move in the same plane, I'm just clicking here and kind of eyeballing it. Same with this one. Same with this one. There we go. And I'm going to move that. Same. Try to move those down and keep them all kind of even. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Don't like how my diamonds are sticking out the bottom here. That doesn't make me super happy. So we'll just put them all up. There we go. Okay. Now let's go ahead and cut those out now. I have to select them all individually now because I ungrouped them. It failed, which means one of these probably in here is like intersecting a surface like exactly. And the program doesn't like that when the two things try to occupy the same space. Kind of like a time paradox. Okay. So let's okay, well, we'll do them one at a time. I'm going to do the channel first. Okay. That's the one it doesn't like. I figured. That should work. There we go. So now we have our stones and little square prongs, which will round out when we actually set the stones, but we need to put in all the holes for the bottoms of those stones. So we're going to select our group again and put these guys in there. Here we go. I'll make that much smaller than my stone because I don't actually want to cut the prongs just yet. And even that out and make it straight. And then make it longer so it goes all the way through. That's good. Now we've got all of our components created. Our ring is pretty much done. We just need to get everything stuck together and all our holes cut out, which is super easy. I'm going to union my ring and all my little prongs here. Don't intersect. Let's double check that. Looks like they intersect. All right, I have to click them all at the same time. If you're looking at my clock down here, I'm working pretty late, so cut me some slack. There we go. Okay. Now we just need to subtract our cutters. There we go. Now we've got our holes there for our stones. Everything's ready to go. All we need to do is export our STL file and turn in our Rhino file. So let me know if you have any questions.